The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome in. It's the Coach Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper Buffalo Rock. Coach Bill Clark, along with myself, Landrum Roberts, yes, and Molly Robinson. We're all sporting these brand spanking new Coach Safely hats. If you're watching us on YouTube, man, these are good-looking hats. We appreciate that, Mr. President.
Yeah, glad to do it. We got some new gear, and so on the back, I don't know if we could see this, but if you'll show that, it says "So They Will Play," which is our new slogan and motto, which we'll be talking more about, I know, at some time. We've got an event coming up, Coach Tuberville and Paul Feinbaum. End of August, we're waiting on Coach Tuberville to give us the exact dates, but you'll be getting to hear that soon. That's going to be a big deal.
It sure is. And speaking of Coach Safely, I know that you were in Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago. I understand that you are returning just, a day ago from Athens, Georgia. So you were over there with Kirby Smart.
Yeah. I think the trip to Washington with Coach Tuberville, Roger Adderhold, the whole trip was about spreading the word for Coach Safely. And as I always say, if we can make something a no-brainer, but who's not for keeping kids safe, to get them out so we can keep them playing, to get them out to play so moms feel good, dads feel good, all those good things. So great trip to Washington. Got to be with Coach Smart yesterday. He said he's all in, so we'll get a PSA from him soon, and hopefully get that passed into law in Georgia as a resolution right now. Ron Corson, the head trainer there, was a Samford grad. Played ball at Samford.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's the head trainer there, kind of an institution, been there about 30 years. He's on our board. Just so many cool things going on now with Coach Safely that I really am looking forward to our event where we can kind of get the word out.
Take us through these visits. You go over there to the facility, I'm guessing. You go into the office. For folks that have never been into that building, can you compare it? Can you describe what you're looking at as you walk in as a visitor?
Yeah, that's a great question. We could send this whole talk about facilities, right? What I would talk about with Georgia is functionality. That was what I wanted at UAB when we built the new facility there. We had $22.5 million. How do we take that and use that the best way? Now, when you get to these places where money is less of an object and it's just what do you decide to do? Of course, we all remember when Dabo did such a great job, Woody McCorvey at Clemson, as I always used to say, the Disney World of football. That was about almost like a destination with putt-putt golf outside and basketball courts.
The slide.
They had functionality too, but it was the wow factor. And then there was the Joneses all trying to keep up with. I think what Georgia has done, which is really so cool to me, it's all about return to play. From having docs full time, you got doctors there, that are there. You got orthopedics that come out through the day. You've got trainers and mental therapists, and obviously the nutrition that everybody's had. But it really stood out to me. Their whole mission is keeping guys on the field and getting them back to play, which is really near and dear to my heart from a training standpoint, and also kind of what we try to do at UAB with using our medical that we had. You
were talking about the facility. I'm just curious, when you were able to sit down and you came up with the brand new UAB football facility, if money was no object and you're redoing it today, would there be something like a slide or a putt-putt course or something crazy? Is there something that you would love to have incorporated if money was not an object?
I think anything that, and I know this might be, it's not a cop-out, it's just what are those things that kids love? We put a basketball going in a barber shop pole with a barber chair there. Wasn't a lot of money and the kids loved it. But what makes them want to be around, that this is their home. So I think all those, like their locker that they're going to be in all the time. That's where I wanted to spend our money, is on those things that.
Well, I remember even when you were in the dental office building.
Yeah.
That when you redid that locker room, remember you and I did a signing day show from that brand new locker room. Just that alone, the players just went crazy for that.
Yeah, somebody posted that the other day. I ended up reposting it, but it was. I don't even think nobody has a real clue. If you go back and look at the day the program was shut down, and we discussed this, Watts was in there talking to him, and I talk about, you could look up to the ceiling, how bad it was. And then we built that locker room on the back. And you've got kids coming through there with tears coming down their faces, coaches with tears. This is their home. This is where they're at all the time. And I think when you can combine great nutrition, and how we're taking care of their bodies, along with the weight room and the indoor attached and some of those. I tell you something I'm seeing now, and I meant to say this after I went and visited Auburn months ago. They have a space outside their locker rooms where a video projector shoots up against the wall as you can do a walkthrough. So there's a combination of I'm watching film and I can do a walkthrough, or I can get that video shown and overlay. I mean, because walkthroughs, because you're talking about obsessed with walkthroughs, because, it's like, all right, I've showed it to you on the board. I've given you a test on it. I've got video. Now let's walk through it before we do it.
I don't know, Coach, if they have the same thing, but I have seen the same technology, and I forgot where I saw it. But it's basically a 3D or a hologram type thing where you can be doing the walkthrough and you can simulate the look that the defense or the offense is going to be giving you, where they're those holograms, and it's amazing.
I really think LSU. I think LSU was one of the first ones doing it, and I'm connected. One of my guys is Derek Panaska, who was with Ed Orgeron, and but Auburn, I think, probably got. Everybody's always trying to, what do we do? But I think the return to play, and Georgia's had. I know, I was talking to Coach Smart yesterday. He was talking about Baltimore Ravens coming to visit them. These pro guys saying, all right, what can we get from you? The big thing that stood out to me was just the return to play and the keeping them healthy and the access to the doctors and the training room and the great food. And it was all real easy to get to.
You talk about the bells and whistles now, and this is for some programs where you got guys that are millionaires, you got guys that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Just an idea for the collective or for the schools. You want to recoup some of that money? You put up a designer gift shop where you've got watches, you got bags, you got threads that people, your players can go and they can spend all of that hard-earned cash on, and you're going to recoup some of the benefits.
I tell you something that was interesting. I heard a conversation about, and I won't say what positions they were talking about, but where do we spend our money? We talked about the visit I had with Auburn where it was, let's go get this NFL model. What is the percentage on a roster that the quarterback gets? Because that's where they are now. Mm-hmm. I'm making a decision. Do I want to spend this money on D lineman or a running back? What did the Philadelphia Eagles just do with Saquon Barkley? So you're always comparing yourself and saying, all right, we've won in this past. We've won with defense and D lineman, especially a guy that believes in defense. And of course, as I always said, let's look at these championship coaches. How many of them were defensive coaches? But how much do I allocate for a running back? How much do I allocate for a receiver? All that, of course, goes in with, as we say, the training and the nutrition and all that. But it's really coming down to now how they allocate dollars and cents for these players.
All right, since you were over there with Kirby, not that you would want to tell us anything behind closed doors, but how is Kirby? Kirby in a good mood? Is he looking forward to the upcoming season? Did he happen to accidentally have a phone call from anybody important that you were there?
Yeah, I think one of the things, it was probably a good time that I was there. They were getting ready. They were finishing up with camp. So, I got some more tidbits for you, but camp finishing up is like, thank God. I'm going to get about a 2-week window here. Some people take more or less, but a 2-week window around the 4th. But you got these visits, this recruiting. And, of course, you've had this second window that's, this is what people are trying to get rid of. You got the Big Ten guys are wanting a window when the weather's better. Mm-hmm. SEC guys are like, shoot, we want that thing done, right after the season. So that, as I'm sure y'all are talking about, that's going on right now. He was in a good mood. I think he feels like his guys are working hard. I think it's the same thing that we would all say. I think we've got a pretty good team, but there's unknowns. And as I talked to the assistants there, it was the same thing. He was getting a call from Coach Saban.
Who?
This guy named Nick Saban was giving him a call.
Oh, the ESPN guy.
Yeah, that guy. Just kind of, hey, and it was going to be one of those calls. What are you looking like? What's it looking like for this year? And it was just funny because we talked about that just a few weeks ago on the show. This is not a guy you're going to fool. This is not a guy you're going to sandbag, and he's going to know your roster. He's going to know you, and it was just interesting to see that play out, just like it would have played out.
So you think he was like fishing for something, for information?
No, he's definitely calling all the coaches to get their what's it looking like. He's doing his homework. He's getting ready for the season. He's starting to call coaches, go through the roster, because that's what he's got to talk about. So he's got to have things to talk about, and he's got to have it straight from the coaches.
Did you hear Kirby call Coach Saban daddy at any point?
I never did hear that. No, that did not. He did not say that.
It's just so interesting though that Nick Saban is calling and trying to get that information that we're all seeking, Pat, in the offseason.
It's amazing.
Coach Clark too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever have anybody like that when you were coaching? A someone that either coached with you or just a friend in the business that when you hung up the phone, you were like, yeah, this was a fishing expedition.
Oh, absolutely. You know,
Were you always guarded like that?
Yeah, I really was. I mean,
So you're paranoid.
very. No,
They all are.
I think
They also
it's,
lie,
it's-
by the way.
Well, it's that I've told y'all that story. Okay, we got a GA or a whatever, and he was at Alabama, and he's now at North Texas. Especially, I always said that anybody that was on Saban's staff had these guys just looked up at him like they're Alabama coaches. I'm like, wait, he's not at Alabama anymore. He's at Marshall. He's at, but that connection that they got from being an Alabama coach with Alabama coaches. I mean, I understood if I was trying to recruit a kid in West Virginia, but I would always tell the coaches, let's be aware of guys wanting to come to practice.
Who was one of the best, and a guy that you wouldn't think would have a problem with you sharing, but the coach that you had a very cordial relationship with, that coached at another school, that would just, oh, shucks, coach, you know us, just poor mouth his team. Maybe not even poor mouth his team.
Yeah.
But who was that coach that was notorious for doing that? And you're doing eye roll the whole time going, come on.
I think it was the ones, I always talk about Skip on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And I always told Skip just, but what he was saying was right. I said, Skip, you talk more than anybody I know, but it was all good stuff. I mean, it was the guys that, there were the other guys that talked that I didn't think were going to be very good that I'd be like, yeah, just keep talking, Where Skip wasn't really bragging on his team. He was all very humble about them. It was just, he just likes to talk, and y'all know Skip. I don't know. I don't.
Doc Holliday.
His was always, like I said, he was always man at the world type deal, but
Yeah.
but a good coach.
Yeah.
But a good coach. It was always interesting when you got in those meetings and watching. What's our guy at Louisville now?
Brom.
Brom and I. It was so funny when we first got in the conference together. He didn't say a word, and I didn't say much either. And we got out of there, and we're both like, okay, we're pretty similar. It's like I'm listening to these other guys, let them talk. I'm not giving anything away.
All right. So speaking of talking, one of the favorite people that we talk about on Three Man Front is Brett Bielema. And he has really been running his mouth a lot, especially after they beat South Carolina in the bowl game. He's been very outspoken about the SEC not playing 9 conference games. He ran his mouth again this week in Chicago in an alumni event. Your thoughts on Brett Bielema? Not as just the person, but his coaching. He failed miserably in the SEC, 11-29. Just your thoughts on Brett Bielema.
Well,
Why are you laughing?
Yeah, we had to play those guys. That was our second game, our second SEC game back in 14. We played Mississippi State, and if Brian Mackin was here, I'd tell him you were insane to do that, and he knew that. I said this will be the last.
But that was
time.
a game you almost beat Mississippi State.
Yeah,
We almost beat Mississippi State. Arkansas, we were beat to shreds. We didn't wear pads that week. I've never done that before. We had a notebook we had our notebooks for FAU on the plane, and it's like when they get on this plane, they're getting this notebook for because we had to beat FAU to try and keep our bowl eligibility. As a coach and what they were doing, and he was trying to do something different, a lot of too tights, heavy, big guys, kind of what he was doing.
Yeah,
at Wisconsin.
Big Ten. Yeah.
I mean, I have respect for him as a coach, and of course, all the time he spent at New England. I just thought it is those guys that just come across as arrogant. It's that they talk too much. It doesn't even mean you're not a good coach because he's obviously a good coach. It's just that, and I get trying to form a chip on your shoulder, but it's that I want everybody to hate me, or I want to play that me against the world, us against the world card. It's just arrogance.
I'm just curious, like for example, when you went up against SEC opponents,
Yeah.
whether it was Kirby, whether it was Mississippi State, whether it was Bielema at Arkansas, that general before the game chit chat.
Yeah.
Like how was that? Was there one coach that it was more awkward than the others and more down to earth? Do you remember any of those?
I knew most of the guys before, and it started
because you just gave us the impression that Bielema was more pretentious than the other
Yeah,
ones.
he was just, we weren't a big threat in 14 when we played him, and it was the same thing with Mullen, and then they were shocked. But then it started getting, y'all
They were a little bit more tight-lipped.
oh yeah, y'all are good. And then then it was worried because here's this school we're supposed to beat. Jimbo was before the game at 18, and we were good. He's like, y'all are an SEC defense. Y'all the best D-line we've seen all year. And they were on a roll was what I hated. But I've known him.
Would you talk during the week, or is that just the pregame?
And you'd hear the things they would say about you before the game, just like I would say about them. I just was never going to give anybody anything. And most of them you have a real respect for.
So take us like at midfield prior to the game. What's it just you're saying, hey, the weather, or like, hey, your quarterback had a great game last week. Like what is that back and forth?
A lot of it is if you've got a background with each other, and
or the same agent.
Whatever. It's just it could be any of those things that are like, and a lot of it's just, wow, I watched you last week. Y'all were super impressive. And then it's usually going to be about your team or some shared thing we had in the past. Like me and Jimbo are talking about each other, and I'm sitting here watching 50 analysts with clocks, with stuff, and and these are, I'm like, okay, wait a second, that guy was a head coach that was fired, and that guy was, and I'm sitting over here with my 22-year-old kids, and you're just, it's just the difference of can we compete in this game for me, and that's a tough. One of the things for guys that have been like high school coaches and small school coaches, you laugh, or even the UABs, you laugh at these guys that have that's all they've ever seen. Like, let me go send you in a high school and see how cocky you get. Let me go see you go to Jack State.
Humbling experiences.
They have no idea. Now, a lot of those guys, though, did work their way up. And I think any of those guys that had worked their way up had a real appreciation. I had a lot of guys that knew me, like Kirby was an assistant at Alabama when we were at Prattville. So, he knew who I was, and I think there was this respect. It's any of those, just a guy that came across as arrogant. I didn't see that hardly any, but there were a few of those guys like that.
Was there ever a guy that, whether it's something that happened in the game, not that you would ever do this, but would there be one coach after a game where you thought, I'd like to clean his clock?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think anything where I thought they were arrogant or they were, I teach so much to the people that just work the officials the whole game.
Just whining the whole time.
Just whining the whole
Can you give
game.
us an example?
Yeah, I mean, there was a guy in our league who's a good coach, and every time the ball was thrown near his sideline, it was interference. He worked the official and would just whine and whine. We had another coach in our league that taught his guys to flop. Would try and create a fight with a guy and flop out like a basketball guy. I'm like, hey, you're actually teaching your players
That's
to flop?
gamesmanship, coach.
Yeah, come on.
Who do you think, Pat?
That's why I'm racking my brains trying to.
Guys who I think are good coaches, who I thought I had respect for, and I lost respect for that. And once again, anybody that you thought was just arrogant.
How was Lane Kiffin when he was at FAU?
Well, we played them in a game that they beat us bad. In 19, they were better than we were. And they beat us good in 19. I'd like to have seen him the year before, maybe the next year, but he was great. He knew me before the game. Marino got kicked out in that game. They worked him, and he got it, and they kind of celebrated on the sideline. I didn't really like, but you just have to take it. In those games when you're not playing as well as you'd like or whatever that is. That's why it's like I always said, when I go shake the hand after the game, I want to be able to say we've done everything we could do. Because after that it's over.
By the way, Garrett Marino, he was playing for the Michigan Panthers.
He was. He texted me that day and said, "Coach, we're going to win this game."
I think he got an unsportsmanlike. No, he didn't get an unsportsmanlike. It was something.
It was
something. So Garrett Marino.
The thing about them, I'll give you the team that was Rice that was constantly.
Oh, that's shocking.
Yeah, and then they ended up getting in trouble for it. That they were working.
Same guy there, or was it previous coach?
It was Coach Bloomgren.
It was
who I knew. I was knew.
Well, he talked some smack. If I remember the week of it was 2022. It was the year that Coach Vincent took over.
Well, he talked after our game. I was so disappointed in him. It was just, what was the point of that? We get a touchdown call back in the last minute. Y'all remember that? They called holding on us, which is I don't think I've ever seen it called before. Same guy called 10 penalties in the game. They had one. Same guy. So, not that I'm still mad about it.
You almost came back and won that game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We came back. We throw a touchdown pass to win the games that you would have won the game with that. And they called holding, and it was the umpire. I mean, it was the it was umpire, and he had called 8. He had thrown 8 flags in that game.
Wow.
Whoa.
And then we have the
Bonus.
same crew at the end of the season, and he's not there. No explanation. He's just not there. You know, but they won. It's you won. Shake hands,
Yeah.
and then you get on. We were bullies, and we were this, and and I'm like, you won. You don't have to say anything. And
What's
that's
the point?
That's the time to be gracious. Those were the games that if I were around the next year,
Been a different story.
it would have been. We would, those are the games that, let me tell you, I promise you one thing: we'll be ready for these folks.
Yeah.
But we had never lost, and they give them credit. It was the flopping, the trying to find, they
Just the whining and everything.
and they were
else.
notorious for it. That they were always working they had a guy in there. Had a guy end up getting for grabbing people in piles and got caught, and they suspended him for the rest of the year.
Wow. So was there any coach when you headed across midfield that never shook your hand? High school, college, anybody?
That was our Southern Miss story that in coach when we won in 18, we won in overtime to win the West.
Mm-hmm.
And of course I knew Coach Hobson, and we played him in 17, won that game.
He seemed like a dirty dude.
Well, it's interesting. We
Love us putting words in coaches'
No,
mouth.
I said it. Coach Clark didn't say it.
Well, it was interesting. I go, it was walk off. Spencer breaks it, we score. So I go running over there to the sideline. It was euphoric. We're on the run, and I always was helmets on, show your class. You could bring one of my coaches on right now.
Yeah.
Win, lose, draw, we're going to show our class. And he's nowhere to be found. I don't see him. That's one of the few times I don't see the coach. So the next year we play them, and their guys won't shake our hands. And then they put it in the paper after the game that I had refused to shake his hand. And it was just, what would you do? Now I couldn't, and let's see, if I remember correctly, in 18, I could not find him for before the game.
Oh, wow.
So that had been played up, and then in 19, I can't find him.
He was busy covering stuff up.
Well, that was a game we were looking forward to in 20.
Right.
And then they got COVID, right, the day before.
Yeah.
Now, he had already been fired, but, that was a game that I was told that somebody happened to be at where we were doing a walkthrough in 19. They happened to be there watching us near Hattiesburg from somebody on their staff. So now, whether that happened or not, I don't know, if that's true or not. And they beat our butt in 19. We had won all the previous times, but they beat our butt. And they were definitely mad and had used that, and there's no telling what all has been said by coaches. Believe me, I've said plenty. So that didn't bother me. Gamesmanship, that is gamesmanship.
When you remember down in the swamp, it was Eli Drinkwitz and Dan Mullen.
Yeah.
And the physical altercation as they're heading off the field. Was that at halftime, I think?
It was.
What could potentially lead to something like that?
Oh, my gosh. There's so many things that are said during the week, things that may have been said, anything you feel like is somebody that's not respecting you. And they could be respecting you in this war. It's just, your life's on the line really every single week. So what people really don't understand, probably to keep the cool that people keep, is really probably amazing that they do keep their cool when their jobs are on the line. It's just those guys. I know you're talking about Belém, but it's the ones that come across as arrogant, because most don't. Most are humble, know how to talk, know how to handle it, try and keep their guys acting right. And it's the other ones that bother you.
I got one more question. If there's a coach, all right, head coach, former, past, present, that we got a cage match, you got to pick a tag team partner, just a guy that you don't want to meet in a dark alley, that you would love to have as your tag team partner.
A coach that I would have with me.
Yes.
not against.
Not
for-
against. Okay.
Yeah. He's gonna be the other half of the dynamic duo.
Let me think on that. So he needed to have been a head coach, or could have been
Could have been an assistant.
well, assistants. Now I'm going to start getting strength coaches. So
Well, okay, let's go head coach.
okay, let me think on that. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
All right, Smart Bank, fine sponsor of this program, and I know it's a wonderful group for people to be a part of. Hometown banking with just a great local feel.
Yeah. I think once again we've talked a lot about Smart Bank having all the amenities of a big bank, but the small town banking feel. Growing as I go to the board meetings and get to hear about what's going on there. But really, people, you just want to go in there and check them out and give them a chance.
Also, Donahue Auto is another fine sponsor of the show. And, you're lucky because it's rained so much here lately that Landrum and I, because we keep tabs on your Tahoe and make sure that it's in tip-top cleaning shape.
Yeah.
And because of the rain.
We have scores. We have grades.
Yeah. So
I get a lot of compliments on how clean I keep that Tahoe, by other than you guys.
Why don't you thank the good Lord for all the rain?
That's what I was about to say. I don't know if he's out doing it, but someone's
Chris
taking care
Donahue,
of
in fact, I talked to him Sunday for Father's Day, and he said, I've heard your car stays very clean. So I think somebody's lying here. Maybe you too.
it. More than likely, it's us too. More so. But they're a great sponsor of the show as well.
Yeah, appreciate our guys at Donahue, and obviously the Chevrolets, but they've got, all cars, with used cars as well. But Donahue Chevrolet, those guys are great.
And also, while we're on a roll, talking about all of our great sponsors here on the Bill Clark Show, K9 Global Protection Group, a home-based company. Landrum ran into the guys over in an Atlanta Braves game. They are all over the place, and another great sponsor of ours.
They are really just local veteran-owned, Braves, NFL games. They're all over the place, airports. Appreciate their sponsorship.
Coach, I want to go back to what we started the program, which is Coach Safely. And I know that you guys are trying to get a lot of things nationally done.
Yeah.
But one thing's important locally, especially with you've got football leagues that are already signing kids up.
Yep.
That's coming up later this summer. And just remind everybody about the website and people trying to get certified.
Yeah, real quick, we don't have long, but just say this. One, we're always going to be Alabama first. Even if we go across the nation, which is what the plan is, we're going to be Alabama first. We're going to be Alabama-centric because this is where we started. But, I think Coach Safely, it's free to everybody in our state right now. It's sponsored. The course isn't free, but we're paying for it for them. Go on the website. You put in your Alabama zip code. Are you with a parking wreck or whoever you with, and you're covered. So go take that course right now. Now, here's what we're doing. We're upgrading everything. We're taking this to the course is going to be the same, but we're going to put all the bells and whistles with it, and we're going to start adding video. And I think I mentioned this. You're going to get to go on there and see multiple strength coaches from across college giving you dynamic warm-ups. You're going to have equipment guys talking about how to fit equipment for multiple sports, not just football, lacrosse, whatever that is. So they're going to be able to go on, and we're going to create an app. So the goal is August, you're going to see a big refresh when we get ready to do at the end of August, do our event. And then you're going to see this refresh. And then my goal in January is you're going to look at an app where you could be out on the field and you could watch a coach could watch this dynamic warm-up. He could watch how to fit equipment. He could pull up a one-sheeter on heat illness or whatever, a PDF if he wanted to print it or she wanted to print it off. So a lot of good things coming.
User-friendly, not as bad as the new NIL Go app. Apparently
that's been a problem.
People are having a problem.
Yeah, we
with.
want it to be user friendly.
Yeah.
And I think, it's just like whether we're talking about gear we're wearing or, we want it to be first class the right way and something that coaches who have got busy schedules, these are dads and moms that are having a day full of activity, and we want to just be able to go, boom, I got to take this test, but also have all these great materials at their fingertips.
Also want to shout out to Jimmy Lee and our title sponsor, Dr. Pepper and Buffalo Rock, because not only they a fine sponsor of this program, but very involved in Coach Safely as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Jimmy was one of the founders of Coach Safely. He's so involved in so many philanthropic. Appreciate Buffalo Rock, Dr. Pepper, and of course, also want to say Matthew Dent as the president. Appreciate all that.
We got to pay it off. Tag team partner, Coach. Who's going to?
I think you said Cristobal.
Mario Cristobal,
the biggest guy that I've shook hands with on the other sideline. I think let's pick him.
All right, there you go. That's this week's edition of the Bill Clark Show. Thanks for tuning us in. We'll be back next week at the same time, same channel. For all of us here at the Bill Clark Show, have a great week.
been The Bill Clark Show, presented